When Flight 2283 crashed in Brazil on Friday, many people were devastated. But many people had the same question. Who indeed was on Flight 2283? Were there any interesting people on this plane? No matter if they are a child or an adult, everybody on board that flight was important. But as we have seen time and time again, when it comes to these major airliner crashes, there happens to be some rather interesting people on board those planes, and this time it would be no different. Reading from this article from The Independent, it says, 8 cancer doctors among those who lost their lives in Brazil plane crash, as 7 others changed flight at last minute. So yes, there was supposed to be 15 oncology doctors, cancer doctors on board Voepass Flight 2283. 7 of those backed out last minute and caught an earlier flight. Now, it is not stated as to why these other doctors caught an earlier flight, but luckily they did because it happened to save their lives. This is something that is rather eerily similar to Flight MH17, the Malaysian airliner that was supposedly hit by a missile. When something like this happens, many people like to bring up MH370 because MH370 had over 20 superconductor scientists on board when it went missing. We should also mention MH17 as well, a flight where everybody lost their lives on board back in 2014, but over 100 of those people were top researchers when it came to AIDS. That is something that's often swept under the rug. Reading this article from The Independent, it says, there are fears the cure for AIDS could have been lost with 100 of the best and brightest scientists and researchers on board Malaysia Airlines Flight MH17. Joop Lang, a world-renowned researcher and former president of the International AIDS Society, was with the group heading to the Global AIDS 2014 conference in Melbourne, Australia. Trevor Stratton, a Canadian HIV researcher attending the conference, told ABC researchers that they had been getting close to a jab against AIDS, and he said, "What if the cure for AIDS was on the plane? Really, we do not know," he said. There were some really prominent researchers that have been doing this for a very long time, and we're getting close to jabs, and people are talking about cures and the end of AIDS. There were even those who were close to Joop that said there was going to be a major announcement. A major breakthrough was going to be announced at this conference, and it never came to pass. People who knew of this breakthrough are now keeping quiet. This is something that has played out all throughout history. Whenever a mode of transportation experiences a major catastrophe, you will find out there are a group of people on that mode of transportation that do have something interesting in common. Remember that very bizarre story that came out where a group of scientists and environmentalists were on a plane heading to East Ohio after the train derailment. Supposedly, they were going to test the water after the train derailment. Their plane crashed. Everybody on board that plane perished. People found out. They said, what's going on here? There's a big cover up here when it comes to the water. News and media came back. They pushed back and said, no, that's just a conspiracy theory. Those scientists, those environmentalists, they were not testing the waters. What they were actually doing, they were going to a plant in East Ohio to test the metals after an explosion. So since the fact checkers came out, that story was also swept under the rug. You can go all the way back to the Titanic and find out there were passengers, multiple passengers, who were fighting the Federal Reserve. They were fighting against J.P. Morgan, and they all lost their lives when the Titanic had sunk. Now look, this Voepass Flight 2283 plane crash could have just been a simple plane crash, an unfortunate plane crash. Either the plane malfunctioned, or there could have been pilot error. But it's very telling when you look at a lot of these news and media videos, the comment sections of these videos. You look at these articles, you read the comment section of these articles, and you have a lot of people who are saying, well, who was on that plane? Who was on that plane that they wanted to get rid of? Then we get news that there were 8 cancer doctors on board that flight, supposed to be 15. We're not trying to make a conspiracy theory here. We're not trying to make something strange here. But again, we're saying this because we have seen this time and time again. It is not a conspiracy theory, it is now a pattern. These 8 doctors did not even need to have the cure for cancer, because there are many different types of cancers. I am sure one cure will not cure all. But what if these doctors were working on something big, some rather big research, where they found the link to what's causing this major increase, this major rise, this explosion of cancer rates in young people around the world? For example, what if they found out that there was a certain injection that many of these people had taken that's now causing cancer, or an increase of cancer rates? Something like that being released to the public would be rather devastating to the pharmaceutical world. So again, they don't need to have the cure for cancer to have some rather big and important information. At the end of the day, whether something shady has taken place here, or it was something as simple as the plane malfunctioning, 62 people still lost their lives, whether they were a scientist or a child. Many people say that Minutes of Horror, you do not have to find the strangeness in everything. You do not have to find conspiracy theories in everything. But my thing is, there's nothing wrong with asking questions, especially, like I said, where we have a pattern where many people have this exact same question. Who indeed were on board the flight? Thank you all so much for watching. When there are more details, more information, more updates when it comes to this horrific plane crash, this Voepass Flight 2283, I will definitely go ahead and keep you all updated. Again, thank you all so much for watching, and thank you all so much for your support.